Welcome to 3D Church. Give it up for my wife, Joy. 13 and a half years of marriage. We've had 5 kids. And boy, have we fought over the years. How many of you can relate to that? And she always wins. She always wins. We're going to continue the series from this day forward. It doesn't matter what the past holds. There's great hope to rebuild the future. Boy, I'm out of shape. And on that running stuff, too, I must have really exerted some energy. We are going to look at some of our interpersonal relationship challenges in addition to just marriage today. So if you're here today and you're not married, that's fine. We're going to look at our interpersonal relationship conflict resolution. How many of you could appreciate some of that this morning? A little battle? Okay, good, most of us. Did you know as far back as we go in human history, man has fought? Adam and Eve, y'all remember Adam and Eve? They had kids. Not Ben and Josh. Those are my kids, Ben and Josh. They had Cain and Abel. And just like Ben and Josh, they fought a lot. Let me just read you. This is the beginning of the Bible. Genesis chapter 4 says this. Why are you so angry? The Lord asked Cain. Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right, but if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. Notice this. One day Cain suggested to his brother, let's go out into the fields. While they were there in the field and went for a walk, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Moral of the story, if anybody asks to go on a walk in a field, run away. You will die. Isn't that amazing that all the way back in human history, at the very beginning, we find anger, conflict, and even murder? So conflict is not a new idea. And this is what's so hard for us to understand, is everything that God makes is good. So why is there so much conflict, and why are there so much issues in the world? We'll look at that a little bit today, a little plug for the Easter series. We're looking at doing a series called Why, and in that we're going to ask some of those big questions. Why are we so messed up? Why is there so much evil in the world? Why is there war? Why are there problems? And one thing we want to do at 3D is we want to make sure that we're talking about life issues and showing how God has an answer and a cure for those issues to help us in our growth and our understanding. You see, God has much to say about problems in this life, and it's not a new thing that we're going to experience conflict in this world. Job says this, the oldest book in the Bible ever written, people are born for trouble, as readily as sparks fly up from a fire. Later in Job he says, is not all human life a struggle? Our lives are like that of a hired hand. Ecclesiastes, the wisest guy that ever lived, Solomon said this, their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless. How many of you are completely inspired right now? Conflict is a part of life. Proverbs 3:30 says, don't pick a fight without reason when no one has done you harm. Simple reason, you're going to have enough problems in this life. How many of you can look back over your life and say, you know what, I have lost more than I've won? That's pretty much everybody. We will lose more than we win. How to deal with the conflicts, how to deal with the losses, deal with the problems is the key to learning a fulfilled life. So here's our big idea today. We can learn to use our conflicts to help accomplish meaning and significance in our relationships. First thing I want to look at, there's a bunch of practical, day-to-day thoughts. Here you go. First of all, how to fight fair. Your wife is always right. Let's go home. How to fight fair. We can learn to manage conflict. Notice this verse in James 1:19 through 20. It says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. 3 thoughts from that verse. This will help us a lot. First of all, we need to be quick to listen. Quick to listen. Right here out of our text. Next verse. Next one is slow to anger. Slow to speak and slow to anger. When conflicts arise, are you quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger? Why is this important? Listening shows value. By listening to somebody, you're showing that they actually have value and worth, and you're attributing that to them. Next thing I want you to notice is choose your words carefully. We're going to move quickly in this part of the message because I want to tell some stories at the end, which I believe will be a blessing and help to you today. Choose your words carefully. Words hurt has the power to give life or death. The Bible has a lot to say on our speech and our tongue. Words are so powerful. Once they're spoken, we all know we can never take them back. Here's some other simple, practical things. Never raise your voice. That's going to be harder for different temperaments than others. Some people, you can have the fire going on and their hair's on fire and they weren't going to be excited about anything. Some people, doesn't take much at all to be at a 10 on an emotion scale. We're all different on this, but we want to work on staying in control. Never get historical. I didn't say hysterical. I said historical. Have you ever been in a relationship where they immediately go back in time and they remember everything that's ever happened at all times? We don't want to be historical when we're in conflicts. Next one is don't use never or always. You never. You always. Okay, there's a lot of elbows right now. Come on, be nice. It's okay. And if you're going to give an elbow, give it with authority. All right. Never threaten divorce. We'll talk about that later in more detail. Never quote your pastors. Well, Pastor so-and-so says, we're not there. Please don't reference us. Another one is know what's worth fighting for. Pick your battles. Just a quick thought on that. It's amazing in our early marriage, the little things that used to rile us up, that we used to get into arguments over. And then, for those of you who don't know us, we've had 5 children. Our third child was Eliana. She was born with severe medical issues, and she died when she was 2.5 years old. Those Eliana years remade us completely. And we'll talk about that at the end of the lesson today, but when we went through those, and on the other side, when we got back to health and all those things, it's amazing how we actually started laughing about the things we used to fight about. We're reading this book, and we're doing these messages from a book written by Craig and Amy Greshel from This Day Forward, and they have the 5 chapters or 5 big ideas, which we're using here. Last week we talked about seek God. This week, fight fair. Next week, have fun. And then stay pure. And then the last week in the series will be never give up. And in their fight fair chapter, their big fight and illustration was over pancakes. Now, I don't want to trivialize this, but as I was reading this, he has his own way of making pancakes, and they're unhealthy, and he believes this is God's way of making pancakes. And she has her healthy blob things, and they have this huge fight about pancakes. And as I went through that and I finished that chapter, I honestly had a moment. My first thought was like, I really wish that pancakes could be my illustration when I teach this lesson. We have been through some hellish battles in our marriage. I get to let you see a little bit of that at the end of the message today. Aren't you excited and inspired right now? All right, here you go. So know what's worth fighting for, and know the difference between criticizing and complaining. This is from the book. I thought this was great. Criticizing is, I wish I could have left earlier. In other words, you're criticizing the situation. Complaining is, you were the reason that we were late. In other words, we want to make sure that we don't personalize our disappointments. Let's keep it objective. Yeah, we're upset we're running late, but don't look at your spouse and say, you're the reason. Don't be that guy. Wouldn't that be a great series too? Don't be that guy. Wouldn't that be great? I keep pitching that idea, and they keep going, I'm telling you, it's going to be good. So anyway. Number two, why we fight. Here's some basic reasons. Let's get a little deeper now. Those are very, very practical. Take those to work. You can, sure your mind's running on a lot of things. Let's go a little deeper. Why we fight. Human nature. Our nature is in us to fight and have conflicts. We saw that in Genesis. Here's some basic reasons. We're individuals. We tend to be selfish. I know you came to church today to learn this. It's deep. We're all different. Did you know men and women are different? Aren't you just so thankful you're here right now? We have our own agendas and ideas. Human nature. Next thing is enemies. Did you know that we have an enemy? His name is Satan, and he's very real. By the way, just for a little theology for a minute, the Bible teaches us very clearly that Satan, our enemy, is our adversary. He's like a lion walking about trying to destroy our lives, those who are God followers. He hates us. And he has his cronies called demons that go with him, and they try to cause havoc all over the world. It's a very real battle. But even though he's considered to be the prince and the power of this earth, the Bible says that even though he has dominion on this planet, he doesn't have dominion over the galaxy. That dominion belongs to Jesus Christ and God the Father. He has come and jacked up this world. So let's be really quick to acknowledge something this morning. The problems of the reason we fight and the pain that we're experiencing take to the right doorstep. That's not God's mailing address. So if you're upset with somebody today, make sure you're upset with the right person, the right power, which isn't God in heaven. There you go. God and his children are fighting against this enemy, and one day we'll have the privilege of reigning victorious. But we can only reign victorious with Christ if we win the battle with God. In other words, we need to decide which family we're in. Are we in God's family, or are we still in this world system? We have to make that choice. And once we choose to accept Jesus and become part of his family, God promises that we will rule and reign with him. The Broncos won the Super Bowl. Okay, that was really bad. We just beat the Panthers. And Cam Newton looked horrible. And that big smile was not on his face. Do you know why the Broncos had a celebration party this week? Because they won. Carolina did not have a party. Did they? Was that in the news? Did I miss that? God says, for the overcomers, even all the way back in Genesis, for those who are in God's family and in his tribe, will rule and reign with Christ. We will have a victory party, overcoming all the problems and the heartaches and the conflicts in this world with God. And so there's great hope for us today that one day all things will be made right. That's why we can celebrate, because we will win. Jesus said this, I told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth, this is Jesus, catch this is what Jesus said. You will have many trials and sorrows. How many of you did not know that that's what something that Jesus said? Can you see that? Can you see your hand today? Jesus promised us that this world is going to be hard. We shouldn't be surprised at all when we experience pain and heartache and sorrows. Jesus said, guess what? You will experience this. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. If that hope wasn't in the Scriptures, we should just go home right now. If there was no comfort for us dealing with this lousy life now, then what's the point? And if there's definitely no promise of restoration in the future, I was reading in Revelation at the end of the book this morning at breakfast right here at Village Inn at Southlands. And I was sitting there reading there with my son Josh, and I was like, I can't wait to the day where the Bible says that there will be no more tears, no more pain, no more conflict, no more sorrows. That Jesus says, I'm going to make all things new. And you know what the idea that we're new is? Is not another. See, we had the wrong idea of this. When we get a new car, we don't take the old car and restore it. We take the old car and get rid of it, and we buy another one. Right? If you're dating, you get a new girlfriend, you didn't take the old one and rebuild her. You went and got a new one. You said, I'm done with that one, we're moving on. All right? When Jesus says new, he says, I'm taking back what's broken and restoring it better than it was the first time. See, you got to understand that. If that principle was not true, then there really is no hope. So what Jesus is saying is, I know that it was painful, and I know that it was hard, and I know that there were tears, and I know there was a broken heart, and I know there was conflicts, and I know it was your fault. But take heart, because I'm going to roll it back in time, restored, as though it never happened, better than the first. That's what our hope is, being on God's family. Isn't that cool? Does that encourage anybody today? I want to talk about another issue while we fight. Weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. Now, let's go a little deeper here. Insecurities, bad habits, not in healthy, safe relationships. Let's talk a little bit about the chemical cortisol. I love talking about cortisol because I can just so relate to it. We live out in Amanda Pine, just south of here, and there's deer everywhere. And right now, they're all over the yard, and they're tearing up my pine trees. And they make me very angry because there's nothing in the field for them to eat, so they come up there and destroy my trees. You guys think they're so cute and fluffy. They're really not. They're bad. They make me angry. They were really cute for about half a day when we first moved there, and then they're cute in the neighbor's yard. But the deer. But what's funny about deer is I've noticed something about them. When you drive around a corner late at night, go around the corner over the hill, and the lights hit the deer, what does the deer do? And what do all his friends do? And they freeze. That's the chemical cortisol. What that does is immediately, when God created all animals, and we have the same cortisol too, is when we're not safe, we don't feel safe, cortisol runs in the brain, pumps glucose into our muscles, so we can do one of two things. We can either get ready to fight or fly, run. Fight or flight chemical. Have you heard that before? But here's something I don't understand. There's some deer that aren't startled anymore. They're dumb. They should be scared because I don't slow down. Depends on what I'm driving. Here we go. It's amazing. We'll drive down to Parker or whatever, and there's sometimes they'll stand right on the side of the road, and they don't even flinch. They've been around for a while. And I want to go up there with my syringe, and I want to punch it into their back, and I want to extract some blood, and I want to bring it down to a lab and have them look at it to see if cortisol is actually running or not. Has it run so long that the side effects are true, which we'll talk about in a second, that they're actually very sickly and they're not healthy? Or have they learned to control the cortisol levels? Let me explain. When you're in an unsafe relationship, cortisol runs. Here's the side effects for cortisol running. The good thing is it gets you ready to defend yourself, fight, or run away. Pumps the glucose in the muscles, you're ready to go. The side effects are this. Your growth system shut down. You don't need nasal hair growing when you're ready to die. It's not important. You need to survive. What's another side effect of cortisol running? Your senses are untuned for survival. Stress causes cortisol. Cortisol for a long period of time weakens your immune system. You don't need to be healthy right now. You need to live. That shuts down. Question. What happens if cortisol runs in your body for extended periods of time? What happens if your growth systems are on hold? What happens when you're in unsafe relationships? Drip, drip, drip. Cortisol, cortisol. Guys, it's like this at work. All of a sudden you hear the rumors that there's job lays off. And all of a sudden that's everybody's cubicle. What happens when you're in a long-term working relationship and cortisol continues to run because your boss is a snake and you're scared? What happens in your marriage? Did you remember that verse that Jesus said, in this world you're going to have problems? But what's the most beautiful part of that verse? Let me go back and read it to you. He says this, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in Christ. That even with your horrible circumstances, you can feel safe because of the peace that God offers in the midst of hard times. And guys, it's important to be in healthy relationships. And I can't talk enough about healthy relationships because that's what makes you feel safe, which keeps the cortisol away, so it uses it in the right times. And builds oxytocin, all those other cool chemicals, which we'll talk about in another day. What are your stressors? Good question. What are your stressors? And you need to identify those things. Because you know what the real issues are that we found in our marriage, in our interpersonal relationship stuff, is the stuff that we actually fought about wasn't the main stuff, but there was stress in the relationship, and it was that stress that caused us to combat it in an unhealthy way. Joy and I, when we lost Eliana and we had all the medical bills and we had her in the hospital and everything was falling apart and my dad just died because he was an alcoholic and our whole world is just falling apart, we didn't fight because so much that we were losing our daughter, but because of the stress, we were making unhealthy choices and we were trying to hit escape hatches and we ran other ways, and those new ways caused more stress, which actually caused the conflicts. Let's unpack that a little further. Eliana's in the hospital. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm living at home with Ben and Josh. Joy's living at Children's Hospital with Eliana. She's been there for 3 weeks. She maybe comes home a couple times on the weekends. We had great friends and all that stuff, and we are so thankful for that. But you know how I dealt with the stress? I worked. I had to raise money. We were about to go bankrupt. I had to work. So I just escaped through work. I escaped through church. Having meetings with people and creating meetings and being on my phone. And having every excuse in the world not to deal with the issues. And they were good things, but they weren't the best things. That's what I did. And guess what we'd fight over? Brian, you're never around. How can I be around, honey? I got to go to work. I got to pay these bills that we can't afford. Do you have to go bankrupt? Do you want to go to the poorhouse? Guys, let's just cut the crap for a little bit. That's where we're going to go today. If you're a good person who has no problems in life, you're free to leave for the rest of the message. Because this will not apply to you. You're still sitting. Okay, good. There's some comfort there. I'm in a safe place because this needs to be a safe place where we can talk about stuff and see how God can meet those needs. Because, guys, let's just face it. We all fight. We all have stressors, and those stresses will cause us to make poor choices. I head through work. I head through performance. I head through trying to get my value outside of my marriage. We did a lot of things like that. Number 3 is this. We need to fight for victory. Did you know that Jesus got angry? I hate a lot of the pictures of Jesus because I don't think they portray him much at all. He's got these big, weepy eyes. He always has children all around him. He's always in a position of prayer. All right. Did you know that Jesus flat out got ticked off sometimes? There's this one day he was down at the temple, and he saw all these people taking money from people who, first of all, couldn't even afford it probably, and promising them if they gave him this money and they could do this, that they'd have better favor with God. And he was scamming people in his house. And he says, that's not how we do it in my house. It's not how we roll. And he walks in there, and he takes these scoundrels, and he takes their table, which, by the way, wasn't plastic, and he picks up this heavy wooden table, and he flips it over. My Jesus did this, all right? This is kind of cool. I like this stuff, all right? So at this point, everybody's watching Jesus, right? If you go into the temple, okay, if I came in here and I flipped a table over, everybody'd be like, cortisol. There you go, right there. Looking at me. The second thing he does is he goes and finds a cord, some type of rope things, and turns it into a whip and starts Indiana Jonesing it on the guys. Are you with me, okay? And they start running. And Jesus is going after them. You say, wow, I didn't know that's what Jesus was like. Was Jesus like that all the time? No. Jesus wasn't angry for angry's sake. He was angry because of injustices caused on the innocent. The burden is on those who can do something to protect the innocents, must do what needs to be done for their safety and for their sake, because they need to feel safe. Because God created us to be in safe environments. And God says, you're not going to do this. Fight for injustices. By the way, do we live in a society where we talk much about fighting anymore? Every peace, peace, peace. Guys, there's conditions that must be met in order for peace to happen. You know this in your own marriage. You know this in your own relationships, at work. If certain conditions aren't there, you're not going to be living at peace with people. Look at the Middle East right now. Would you call that a peaceful region? Syria is trying to exercise peace, laying down arms this week. Do you think it'll work? John Kerry says it's going to work. So I read on my little alert. No more fighting in Syria. They're going to live at peace. Okay, sure, for 5 minutes. Because there are people that want to cause harm on innocents, and they're going to raise up arms, and they're going to cause problems. And they need to be dealt with. Okay, guys, let me be a little more straight with you. If you come at 2 in the morning to my house, and you try to rob me and try to hurt my family, I have an arsenal in my closet. And you will die. I have dogs. They'll alert me. I got my assault rifle. Pretty good at it. Don't try that. So we can be at peace, okay? We're not going to be really friendly at 2 in the morning if you try to come in there and try to commit atrocities to the innocents in my home. Do you see that's what God's purpose is for those who are in leadership positions? One of the roles that we have is to defend and protect those who cannot defend and protect themselves. That's one of the requirements that we need to have to remove conflict so that peace can happen. That make sense? Don't you wish that everybody was just naturally good and we didn't have to talk about any of this stuff and nobody had bad plans? But as we saw from the beginning of humanity, Cain murdered Abel. Don't go on walks in fields. Point 1, under Fight for Victory, is simply this. We must learn, I'm going to lean on you now, you ready? To fight through. Not around, but through. One of my greatest stories of Jesus in the whole Bible is Jesus says, disciples, go across the lake. I need to go pray. And he sends them in a boat into a storm that he prepared for them. To the point it was so bad that they were ready to despair and jump ship in the major storm that was brewing on the lake. And then Jesus shows up and calms the storm, and then they show up where they are. It's this great story. Here's one of the greatest principles of God that I could ever share with you that's our own personal story. Is I don't care how bad you think it is. And I don't care that you don't think you can't make it, because there's not one storm that Jesus cannot carry you through. And I'll go toe-to-toe to you all day long on that point. The verse that carried me through so many hard times is the one I'm going to share with you right now. 1 Corinthians 10:13. He says, the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. And when you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you can endure. You know, as a young boy in church, I thought that temptation was stealing or lying or committing adultery in my heart or whatever that temptation was. You know what that temptation could be in your life? That you would want to curse the God that gave you life because you want to raise your fist to the heavens and say, God, why are you trying to kill me? That's a good temptation, don't you think? Do you know how hard it was many times when I was in complete despair, when I was still pastoring a church, that I didn't even know why I started? Well, I know why I started it, because I wanted to escape the problems I had to deal with and show everybody that I was a soldier for Jesus Christ and I could fight a good fight. That's why I started it. Good intention. Bad result. So what do you do when your daughter's being resuscitated in the hospital and you're up all night and you got to go preach it Sunday morning at church? You calling sick? No. Because it's what you do. It's your lifestyle. How do you get up there and you stand before God's people and say, hey, guys, I just want to let you know that God loves you and He has great things in store for you. And just love Him, love Him, love Him. What do you do when you sit there and you have the thoughts in the darkest moments at 2 or 3 in the morning when you're sitting there with God and you're like, God, this is my fault. So, well, Brian, how could having a child with severe medical issues be your fault? I'll tell you why I thought it was my fault. We had 2 boys. We really wanted a girl. So we found all the different home remedy methods to try to prevent the boys from swimming so we could have a better chance of having a girl. And we had a girl. And then we have a girl with severe medical needs. And then she dies. And then you have to say, did I just mess up what God intended? Is this my fault? What do you tell that mother who all messed up and she's on crack cocaine, or she's an alcoholic and she has a child with fetal alcohol syndrome? What do you tell them? Oh, life will just be all good for you. Just love Jesus more. Give me a break. Let me tell you what you tell those people. Let me tell you the hope that I found. Let me tell you that stuff that will help you with the grace. Is, first of all, we had to come to the realization that there's nothing in this life that God will put in our paths that He will promise that He can't carry you through. And you got to claim that, and you got to hold on to that, and you cannot let that go no matter how big that mountain or that storm looks. That's number one. The second thing is you have to believe this. Because I think we're selling a cheap grace out there in American Christianity anymore. Because we live in a society anymore where we don't want to take responsibility for our poor choices. Our society made us do it. Guys, I've had every excuse in the world to be jacked up and messed up. I had a horrible earthly dad in so many ways. And frankly, you want to know the God honest truth? He jacked me up more than losing a child with severe medical needs. Let that sit there for a minute. You know what I learned about God? Is God comes down there in the trenches with you and He says, I'm so sorry. I'm not sitting up there looking down and saying, come on, soldier, fight a good fight. No, He's coming down there weeping alongside me while we go through the crap together. That's the God that I found. That's the God that gets down on the floor with me, and He wrestles with me, and He picks me up, and He dries the tears from my eyes, and He says, Brian, there's a day that I'm going to make all this new, and I'm not going to make another world, but I'm going to take those pains, and I'm going to take those injustices, and I'm going to take every problem that you've caused on anybody else on the face of this earth, and I'm going to wind back the clock and erase it as though it never even happened. That's the God that I found. You see, that's what grace is. You see, grace is not just unmerited favor and kindness. Grace is taking all the crap and the mess and the hell of life and eradicating it back to perfection as though it never happened. That's why Jesus says, it is finished. Can I tie something together for you theologically? When Jesus hung there on the cross and his arms were outstretched, and the last things he said on this earth were what? It is finished. Read Revelation 21. Do you know what it says in Revelation 21? When he says, I wipe all tears away, I make all things new, I have a new heaven and a new earth, and I'll make it all right. It is finished. What he says, it is accomplished. It is done. You see, here's the thing, guys. You can't just come into the world and say, okay, God, I'm committed to go through. But I'm willing to go through with my spouse and God. You see, Keith talked great last week about seeking God and keeping God in the middle of our world. He talked strong about making God our one and us as two. He talked about that. And you have to have that right. Come here, babe. And you can rest with that. And I just talked to you about what grace actually looks like. He's not just looking away as though it never happened. He says, I know it happened. I went to the cross to deal with everything that happened so that I have the authority to make it right again. Because if there's one thing that we had to figure out in our marriage, because by the way, did you know like 83% of couples that lose kids divorce? Did you know I was suicidal? I don't want to be here. I definitely don't want to look at my wife who reminded me of my child that was in the grave. I want a fresh start. But here's the most beautiful thing. The day that I could look at my wife, and she could look at me, and she could see all the crap, and all the pain, and all the wounds, and the injustices, and all the poor choices, and all the fighting, and the conflict, and the heartache, and look me and start kissing those wounds and embracing the crap, not just the good, is when we experience grace. And we felt God's presence. So instead of us going for so many years of fighting, we could finally fight together. And I'm telling you, I know it's hard. I know you may want to quit. But there's not one mountain that God will not carry you around, but he'll carry you through. There's not one storm. You think of the biggest hurricane on the face of the earth. I'm telling you, God says, I'm the God of hurricanes. And the greater the storm, get this, the greater the miracle. Did you catch that? So there was a day that I finally said, you know what? I'm going to have a story that my great-grandkids can talk about. I hate talking about this. Pastor Keith says, I want you to serve the people today. I don't want to do this. I'd rather pull a Joel Osteen and smile right now, okay? But I'm telling you, the day that I could finally say, God, it's going to be a legacy because we did it, something that only you could do. My friends, we're going to have folks to pray with you. I'm telling you, I would love to pray with you. Joy would love to pray with you. Guys, life is hard. It's hard. Good. We got the first thing. We accepted it. We understand it. Maybe we don't even understand, but we just acknowledge it. Will you commit whatever that challenge is, that conflict, that problem in your life? Would you just do the first thing? And first of all, if you're married today, would you look at each other and say, honey, I don't know how, but we're going to do this. We're going to get through it. And we're going to embrace God like we never embraced him through. And we're going to take him at his word that he promises nothing will overtake us, but we can overtake it. We can conquer it. We're going to do it. And we're going to do it together. And you may be here and say, Brian, my spouse isn't even here because she wants nothing to do with this Jesus thing and this God thing, and I am so alone. I want to pray with you that God would eradicate her heart or his heart or wherever that is, and I want you to experience the power of God that your great-grandkids can find out about. It is time for us to quit running away from the problems of life, but take God at his word and say, God, we're going to go through because you're the God of restoration, you're the God of second chances, and there is nothing that we can't accomplish with you. And it's a God story, and it's a God time. As Aaron begins to play, we have counselors to come. Let's all stand together. And we're here to serve you. Guys, I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy. I'm going to tell you it's going to be really hard. But I'm telling you, there is nothing that God can't carry you through. But do it together. God in heaven, we love you. We thank you for your word. Your word is life. We're not interested in just doing new behavior changes. We want to experience true transformation. And true transformation is when you can accept us on our worst day and still embrace us because there's so much greater things still to come. And there's no greater moment of truth and acceptance in the human heart than get to the place in our lives where we're okay, that you're okay with our mess, and that you can rebuild it. Lord, work in this time. Give people the courage to respond for prayer and hope and opportunity. In your name we pray. Amen.